Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Grid Dynamics webinar. My name is June Bauer, and today we're going to be connecting the missing link, talking about how you get from data to insights. I am really delighted that you all took time out from your busy schedule, and I'm sure the many Zoom meetings that you've been attending, to be able to join us this morning. And I do hope you're going to enjoy this next hour because we've got some wonderful speakers from some great brands that you probably recognize on this slide who are going to be joining us today to discuss this very topic. I do want to tell you that we, appreciate your time, but also we would love to have your input into this webinar. So I would encourage you that if you have questions, please chat them to us. And we would love to have your questions in the chat, and we'll be collecting those during the course of our discussion. And then we'll leave plenty of time at the end to have your questions answered by our amazing panelists. So I'd like to start with introductions, and our agenda today will be introducing our panelists. Then we're going to have a panel discussion, and it should be lively and interesting. We're going to have questions for our panelists. And finally, the opportunity to have your questions answered. So again, feel free at any time to put your questions in the chat. If you want to call out a specific person you'd like to have answered, that would be great. And if not, just put your question in there, and we'll be sure to get to your questions in the last third of our meeting today. All right, so let's get to our first topic, which is introductions. And as you can see, we've got a stellar panel, and I'm going to let each panelist introduce themselves and tell us what they do. And I would like to start with Tony. So Tony.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, June. Morning from Hillsboro, Oregon. My name's Tony Kippen. I've been in data around 23 years. Currently, I work for Nike, and I lead the global consumer data team here at Nike. Before Nike, I led the marketing technology team at Starbucks. I like being at the intersection of data and activation as it comes to consumers and or internal customers. But excited to talk with everybody here this morning, get to know a little bit about this direction, and maybe help some people with this linking problem that people seem to have. So good morning.
All right, and Shankar.
Sure, thanks, John. Hi, everyone. It's great to meet you all today. I'm Shankar Subramaniam, part of Broadcom. I head the engineering for one of the product line as part of the enterprise software division. I have over 23 years of product engineering leadership experience, out of which close to 20 years I've been with CA Technologies, which is now acquired and become part of Broadcom company. So being in the data and being doing a lot of analytics work, specifically I'm interested towards the unstructured data mining and getting insights out of the unstructured data. Build few conversational AI platforms that could be used out of the open source as well. Thank you. Glad to meet you all.
Great, Shankar, thanks. And Aaron, how about you?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. It's my honor to be on this call today. I've been at H&R Block and been immersing myself in data and analytics for the last 17 years, ever since I started using SAS. I don't even know if anybody on the call even, there's probably a lot of people on the call that don't know what SAS is. But I'm really interested in how to leverage data to drive operational efficiencies and better client experiences. And that's really what I'm focused on.
That's great. And Matt, welcome.
Thanks. So my name's Matt Yanchishin. I've been at Amazon and more specifically at AWS for over 8 years now, which I like to joke is about 500 human years. The cloud is a thing. It's been moving pretty quickly. Last few years, I've been focusing on building software that really helps our customers do things that they would have had to do with a lot of humans previously. More recently, I took over a few initiatives, including AWS Service Catalog and AWS Control Tower. And we'll hear later, but there's a lot of analytics companies or people doing analytics using Service Catalog in particular. So looking forward to sharing some insights today.
That's great. We're so happy you could join. And Max.
Yes, my name is Max Martinov. I'm CTO of Grid Dynamics. I have been with the company for about 12 years now. And at Grid Dynamics, we are a digital native technology services company, and we help companies accelerate growth. And we do that to a large extent with data, by helping companies take advantage of data and turn data into insights.
Fantastic. And we want to thank Max for being our host today, Grid Dynamics hosting this webinar. So very excited to have you all here today and have our audience here today. And I want to introduce myself. My name is June Bauer, and I have been in the Silicon Valley since the very beginning of computers, pretty much, and had the opportunity to work at Apple Computer in the very early 80s with Steve Jobs and the rest of that crew, and launched the Macintosh, and then went on to do many different marketing jobs in the Valley, was the vice president of brand at Adobe, went on to Cisco to run their integrated marketing. I've been at many startups and worked with many startups, worked at a VC for a while, Lightspeed Venture Partners. And I also worked at a company called Webex. And I want to start by telling you a short story about Webex. So Webex, at the time I worked there, it was an interesting transition. Cisco had just bought the company, and Webex was all done via sales on the phone. So they weren't using the internet or online in any way to sell the product. And I started there as head of marketing and also head of what was to become the online business, the general manager of the online business. We hadn't sold anything online, so we had to start the business from scratch. And we got the business going. And then we said, look, we need to, based on what's going on in this industry, we need to change our business model, because a lot of meeting products were starting to introduce this idea of freemium, of a free product, and then trying to get people to upgrade. And that was all being done online. Well, the online business absolutely took off. That was the easy part. But then we wanted to go to this freemium business model. And let me tell you something, because Cisco and the company, it was a very foreign model to Cisco, and Cisco was not very excited about giving something away for free. It simply wasn't in the DNA of the company. So it became a pretty tough battle. And we had to really use data to convince people that this was a good idea. But the other thing we needed to use data for was where would we draw the line? What would we give away for free? And what would we charge for? And that became a real bone of contention internally, is how can we make sure that we're not giving away too much? So the first thing we did was a conjoint study, for those of you who know statistics, where we tried to figure out what would really be of value to the consumer. And the engineers all thought it was going to be like high definition video or high definition audio. Honestly, I wasn't sure what it was going to be, but we found out something very interesting. And that interesting thing that we learned was this. Three people. That's what we learned. We learned that people wanted to have meetings, but what they were willing to pay extra for was more people in a meeting. It was not high definition video or audio or any of those fancy features the engineers wanted to build. It was simply how many people could they have in a meeting. So I thought, this is great. Well, let's break it off at, a certain level where more people can be in the meeting. Well, guess what? Cisco wasn't super excited about that either, because they said, hey, where do we put this price break from free to paid? So I turned to our analytics team and our data team, and I said, can you help me here as the business owner? And they came back with some phenomenal data and some phenomenal insights for me. And one of the most important things that I heard from them was, look, what we know now is that most people don't have meetings with more than 2 people in a meeting. And I went, oh God, that's bad news. But the good news is that once a month, people have a meeting with more than 2 people. And that was the good news that the data and analytics team delivered to me. And that was such a huge insight for our business, because that told me I now know where I can break free to paid. And we actually broke it at, hey, you can have, you know, up to 2 people in a meeting. You want to add a third, boom, you're going to get a message when you try to add that person that says, hey, you need to upgrade and pay if you want a third. And that business took off. And guess what? That business ended up, well, it grew phenomenally, but we actually increased our sales by 25% in that first year, just going free. So offering free actually increased our sales, something that seems counterintuitive. But without the data and analytics team, I could not have made that happen. Now, that was in the old days. That was 10 years ago. Today, what we've got is a group of panelists who have tremendous experience using much more sophisticated techniques, much more sophisticated tools. And the things that you can do and learn with data should be having a huge impact on your business. And I'm going to turn to our panelists now to help us do that, to help us learn what you can do today and what the tremendous things are. So I'm going to come out of our presentation in a minute, and we're going to start to ask our panelists questions. So let's start with a question here. And Matt, I'm going to start with you on this one, which is inspire us with an example of insights that influence the action and results your business achieved.
Yeah, I guess I'm more in the business of inspiring other customers, you know, our customers to gain those insights. So these days, I'm general manager for Service Catalog and Control Tower, so 2 AWS services, and I've been digging a lot into our customers and what they're doing with the services, and by extension, and a lot of them are customers who are deriving insights through one of 2 ways: through sort of more classic analytics or big data workloads, and also increasingly through machine learning. So I think when I think of some of the savvy, you know, big users of AWS, companies like Intuit is a good example. They're really good at gathering their data in one place and building big data lakes. And you see this at other big customers like Vanguard or Fidelity, or we have a joke at AWS that if you say Netflix, you have to do a shot. But at Netflix as well, they're excellent at gathering data and making it accessible to their data analysts and other people through self-service. And so they're able to really derive insights very, very quickly and experiment. So they're not limited to kind of one set of insights. So for example, customer segmentation or even fraud detection, because we have a lot of financial services customers, are 2 that we see a ton. You know, insights into, you know, how often are we seeing fraudulent transactions for financial services companies? Or are we, to your point earlier, are we properly understanding our customers and doing customer segmentation? And that's only possible with a ton of data. And so really what we're trying to push on, and the trend that I'm seeing with those customers like Intuit or Fidelity or Vanguard, is building of data lakes, centralization, and then self-service access to that data and to the right tools to drive different kinds of insights. So I guess another way of saying that is the type of insight you're going for is largely dependent on the type of tool you're using a lot of the time. So we're increasingly seeing a trend with big customers and small customers where they're using more sort of purpose-built algorithms and purpose-built tools to drive different kinds of insights for a variety of problems, not limited to their core business. You know, these financial services companies aren't just doing fraud, they're also doing customer segmentation for their retail bank applications, for example. So those 3 things, you know, self-service access to data, purpose-built tooling, and, you know, really freedom to use a variety of tools and algorithms to get a variety of insights in real time, and not being too prescriptive about what those insights should be up front, allowing their teams to experiment.
Okay, that's great. Super helpful. Let me turn to Shankar now. And from your experience, Shankar, can you inspire us with an example where insights really helped influence action in a company?
So I always say this, right? So I have been talking this internally and externally to people. Whenever we talk about any analytics or solution, it needs to be more of an actionable insights that we provide to it. When we call about actionable insights, I look at it this way, right? So let's take an example of a coin, which has got 2 sides to it. So, but how do you see that? How do you make someone to look at both the sides and get an insight into it and what it is? So I would look at it this way, like one side, I would call it as the delivered experience. The other one is the perceived experience. Let's say you build an application and wanted to do a digital transformation, which is what most of the leaders today are trying to drive and makes a success out of it. But the challenge is, how do they make success out of that digital transformation? How do they know that they have something, an insight that they can take a look at it and make an action out of it? So let me take an example. Like today, a lot of people are adopting Agile and as well as the DevOps. So when you do that, the challenge is you are looking at some of the metrics that is given to you to take an action, but is it like one side or you're looking at two sides of the coin? So for example, you deliver an application, you develop an application for your digital transformation and deliver it to a customer. And if the customer is able to install it and able to adopt the application, that's the delivered application. The second one is, how do they perceive the experience of it? So this is something similar to, you try to book an Uber and the analytics says that the car is going to come in 2 minutes. But if the car didn't arrive to you in 2 minutes, if it takes like 5 minutes to 10 minutes, then the experience is different for you, the perceived experience. So that's how the analytics actually. So you provide an insight which is matching to the delivered experience and also calculate the perceived experience and then build back and provide it. So what I found is some of the solutions we built, we integrated something called as a sentiment analysis. So you provide a suggestive search or suggested solution for an action to take for an IT operations. So when the analyst looks at that solution, does it really resolve the problem for him or her? If it resolves a problem, you capture the sentiment of the customer and then track it back into the system. If in case the sentiment of the customer says that the problem didn't really resolve it for me, then take it back and improve the machine learning algorithm that you have and then provide a better insight that can make a better action for the users. So this is something that I always talk about it as two sides of the coin, which is something that people can consider while developing and delivering solutions.
Great, thanks, Shankar. That's interesting. So Aaron, I'm going to turn to you for this one. So I'm curious to know how you deliver insights to various internal business groups and how you manage and set expectations with them, because sometimes we obviously need to set expectations because there are internal stakeholders and customers, but at the same time, we may not be sure that we can actually deliver on what we're saying we would like to do. So how do you manage that internally?
A lot of it has to do with the level of the customer that you're presenting the insight to. So for the CEO, for example, we would want to make sure that multiple people have looked at that insight. We all agree that it is within the realm of possibility. There's a low likelihood that the insight is incorrect because a large, important decision that will impact the entire company could be made off of that insight. And then we want to button it up in a way that is very easy to understand and try to anticipate as many questions as we can and provide answers to those questions. So the CEO, for example, is, has everything he or she needs to, take that insight and run with it and make a quick decision to benefit the organization. If you take it down to a product team that you interact with very frequently, their style, and you provide them data or insights on a very frequent basis, the cycle times are much faster and you're much less concerned about the quality of the insight, because what the team is focused on is making rapid decisions with as much information as they can. They might have 50, they might have 70% of the information, but they want to make sure that they're getting those insights into their products as soon as they can, maybe doing some A/B testing to validate that insight is accurate. And so I think it really depends on the comfortability of the user with data, to be honest with you.
That is good. And so really thinking about the people that you're meeting with, that you're serving, and where they're at, and where they're at in the voyage, and if possible, helping them understand along the way. I think that's really important, because we can all have the most wonderful information, but ultimately we need to get our internal stakeholders aligned with us. So let me move to another question, and Max, I'm going to actually throw this one out to you, which is, let's get into the meat of it. What are the biggest challenges that stand in the way of companies being able to take their data and turn it into insights?
Sure. Well, Jim, there are many different challenges, and there are many different anti-patterns that we saw different companies doing. But probably one of the biggest ones is just the general availability of the data. Because if you don't have the data, or if you have the data but it is in a form that that is not available to anyone, then obviously you will not be able to do it, and you will not be able to turn this data into insights. Of course, low quality data also is one of the big challenges that typically prevents companies from efficiently using it. And sometimes companies are just being very tight on making the data accessible within the enterprise. And I actually want to give an example of like how we overcome a couple of challenges, and kind of ultimately we're able to deliver these insights and brought some value to a company. We had a very interesting project, which was a completely and pure engineering project. We were building the pricing and promotion engine for one of our clients. And the project was mostly about the different business rules that the engine needs to support, and what promotions do you need to give to the clients, and so on and so forth. But most of these prices and promotions and offers were configured by the merchandising team and by the business users. But because that specific company had data relatively open, of course, with all the security precautions and so on and so forth, we were able to take this project a little bit deeper and actually analyze what kind of promotions are being set by the merchandising team, and how customers are reacting to it. And we saw that that actually the promotions and the offers and the prices were very coarse-grained, and sometimes the company was leaving money on the table. And sometimes the customer who needed a little bit deeper discount, we're not getting that, and that is why we're not converting. So if we didn't have that we would not be able to take this whole problem forward. Now, with that, we actually went to the business team. We did some analysis, and we actually saw that the company was leaving money on the table, but at the same time not converting some other customers. We did that analysis, and we came back to the merchandising team. And another big challenge is setting expectations and explaining the value that you can bring in a way that that will not harm anyone in the company. And we were ultimately able to collaborate with the team very well, and we built a real-time offers functionality using customer behavior and using a couple of new AI models that we implemented. And we were able to generate quite a significant revenue, just incremental revenue comparing to what the company was generating before. And the cherry on the top was that it was actually all in the middle of COVID, when all additional revenue was very important. So to summarize that, we would not be able to do that if the company was not open with the data, if the data was not accessible, if the business teams are not open to experiment with something new, and if the quality of data was low.
That was a great example because we could see how there are definite challenges in getting from data to insights, but at the same time, if you can overcome them and you can manage them, you can get some really quite spectacular results.
Exactly.
It's really wonderful. So let me turn to our audience now. I want you guys to help me with something, which is if you can all click on that button on the lower right-hand side, the Q&A button. So this is everybody who's listening out there who came to join us today. I'm going to ask you to help me with something, which is how many of you have, and I want you to just type into the Q&A a yes or a no, okay? So go into the Q&A and right now just type yes if you have challenges with your data and with making sure that your data is cleaned, is good, is consistent. So if you have data challenges, go into that Q&A and type yes. If your data is all good and that's not your challenge at all, you can type no. And I see people typing and I really appreciate it. Just take 1 sec to go in there and type.
The data is never too good.
So, you're cheating. You're telling people the answer, Max. That's cheating. I see a lot. I see a lot of people coming in here. Okay, I think the vast majority are saying yes. Now, some of you are saying no, which is awesome. If you can manage your data. I mean, I know just having done marketing for many, many years that keeping your data clean is not a one and done. You know, I mean, keeping your data up to date, especially when you're dealing with selling to marketing people who seem to get fired more often than any other type, it's really challenging. But yeah, I see a lot of you do have challenges. So my next question has to do with this very topic of data. Let me ask Aaron this next question. So if data's bad, there can be some dangerous business consequences. And I'm wondering, Aaron, if you've seen any of those.
Oh, absolutely. And it's really exciting from my perspective. Transforming data into information to make better, faster decisions is what it's all about. And when the data's bad, the information's bad, the decision's bad, and you could really, really harm the company by making a wrong decision based on bad data. And now, I mean, you could have transformed that data into an insight incorrectly or whatever, but oftentimes it does start with bad data or data of low quality. And, you know, I don't think anyone on the call is going to air any dirty laundry, but I have seen that decisions get made only to find out days or weeks or months later that those decisions were the wrong ones, and they could be completely the wrong ones based on the analytics that were done based on the data that was provided. And you had to do a 180 and undo those decisions, or and that's hard to do. And you know, like Max said, you're leaving money on the table, or worse, you know, you could be giving your competitors an advantage over you for that particular product for that particular period, and you also lose confidence in your data and analytics and reporting teams when those types of things happen.
I think that's a great point. And that kind of brings me to my next question, which, Tony, we haven't heard from you yet. So I'm going to ask you this question to start, which is, as Aaron said, I think, you know, you can lose trust in your data. Your internal customers can lose trust in your data, and that can be devastating to your business and to your organization. So what exactly do you do to ensure that this doesn't happen? And what can we tell our audience today? I mean, what are the pragmatic things they need to be thinking about so they don't end up in this situation?
Yeah, thanks, June. So I think the first thing to start off with is, you know, trust is universal. It's like any type of relationship that you have. It requires constant effort and care to maintain, build, and keep it going over time. The other thing to note is trust it take a long time to build. It can take a long time to fix and reverse, but you can lose it in an instant and it can be gone. So the same thing is said for data and data teams. So we're building data, we're working with other business units, building that trust. One bad decision made off the insights can really like destroy a lot of that trust between teams, right? Because ultimately it ends up being where we're working with businesses and stakeholders to really drive a lot of insights. You know, I don't know about the rest of the team here or group, but we power other teams to be successful. So their success, we help them gain success. And so it's really a good relationship that we have to build. The other thing to note is you need to have a plan for when trust is lost, because you know, we're in technology, we're in innovation, and ultimately we are going to end up in a situation to where we have to rebuild trust or build it back up. So starting with the understanding that it is going to happen, at least you have a plan for when it does go down. And so you can actually turn it around and start to build on it. But it's like any relationship. So key takeaways here. I look at maturity in two aspects. One is the technology aspect side of things. So how am I maturing the business's technology, data platforms, and ecosystem? And the second really is the maturity of the business to be able to make business decisions off of data in a quick, fast turnaround. And that second part is really important from a trust perspective and building really key relationships as you go down. So start small, get early wins with your business stakeholders and customers, and it helps drive that trust in the data. And don't lose sight of that. I mean, the relationships, meeting with your stakeholders, meeting with your customers is a very important part of our job. Because when you tell stories with data, it takes multiple people, right, in the environment to bring that to life. And data people need to be part of that story, and we tend to forget that sometimes. But trust is a big deal. Data incorrectly taken and insights made can be devastating to the organization as well as the company. We need to have secure lockdown plans in order to drive that in the right way. And we're very agile, so failing fast, innovating. I have several stories where we start small and the data doesn't look great. And we had, I think Aaron talked about bad data, you know, driving the trust. It includes data quality, and driving that up to the source systems to be able to manage and control is something we're doing at Nike and driving pretty severely down that right path. So, but it's a very important thing to get on track as soon as possible. Especially if you're joining an organization that doesn't have trust. You've got to focus on the relationship and really start to build that out before you can actually build a lot of the technology components. See what I've seen in my experience.
Tony, what are if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, what are the specific things you're doing to improve your data quality?
Yeah, so my team, we actually own the front door for a lot of our Nike experiences, something called data capture. So any consumer behavior, consumer data that's flowing flows through my teams. We end up basically collecting and landing those data in a really quick, fast way, and or passing it off to different kinds of vendors in order to activate and actionalize those data. We're not responsible for tagging up the sites. We provide the collection tools as well as the tracking tools, as well as all of those components. But engineering teams on the experiences actually go and implement that. So there's two ways to get around the quality of the data. The data is going to start flowing from the experiences, and I can either add people to go and fix the data after the data is landed, or I can provide tooling around the capture components in order to drive the awareness and transparency of how the data is flowing up to the experience owners. And so that is a trust component as well, because now I'm connecting the data capture, engineering, experience teams with the actual downstream data science organization, as well as our team kind of playing that middleman. And we're not calling people out for quality. We're in this together, but experience teams have to kind of raise that awareness, and the transparency has to be there. So we're really focused on the tooling and the insights up at that data source level, because bad data flowing down, it doesn't help anybody. And so fixing it at the source is, if you can, is the best place to do it. And tooling and insights and transparency around that to help them fix themselves is what I've seen the most successful. Adding people to a problem downstream to fix the data after the fact can be very costly and expensive. Yeah,
that's really great advice. And Max, maybe I can turn to you, because you work with so many different customers across the board. You know, we heard what Tony had to say from a Nike perspective, but from your perspective, working with so many companies, what advice can you give to our attendees here today to help them improve their data quality, so that when they go to use advanced techniques to try and get that missing link to insights, that the data is fundamentally high quality?
Sure. So first of all, like I said before, there are many ways to get it wrong. Unfortunately, not that many ways to get it right. But the good news is that if you take an agile approach, and if you're not too afraid to fail fast and fail small, then you should be able to fix the situation and improve it going forward. Specifically from the quality of data, Tony talked about a very important thing, that you need to ensure that the data is important and the trust is there end to end. One other thing that where we often start helping our customers by doing some small wins is to actually understand when your data is corrupted. Because if you don't know when your data got bad in your data pipeline, you will ultimately generate wrong decisions, and you will generate wrong reports, wrong dashboards, and everyone will be disappointed. So the data might get corrupted due to a number of different reasons, and it's important to catch it timely and report it. So continuous data quality, continuous data monitoring, both by implementing some business rules and employing some AI-enabled techniques like anomaly detection, is extremely important in at least detecting that the data got bad. And it's especially getting important now, because more and more companies start building closed loop systems. When your data flows from your channels of engagement, you process the data, then you have some AI model that generates decisions, and then you use these decisions to show the customer next best action, to generate marketing campaigns, to give them offers and promotions. If the data is corrupted somewhere and you don't observe it, then something can go really wrong in the end of this whole funnel.
Yeah, those are.
So, and it's not a one-time process. It is a continuous process, and data quality should become a part of data ops and ML ops that companies continuously implement and continuously improve.
Yeah, that's great. That's super helpful. So data quality, really important. Part of it is process, keeping your eye on the ball. I think these things all are going to be critical to getting insights that really make a difference. I know that today we've got Matt joining us from Amazon, and I know the cloud is near and dear to his heart, but I know it's near and dear to many companies' hearts right now. And I also know that there's some reticence on the part of some companies to move to the cloud with data. But I think it's really important that we understand how very, very powerful the cloud can be in helping us make that transition. And Matt, I want to ask you specifically what your view on this is, and how the cloud can help people like the companies that are represented here today on this call to more effectively bridge that link between data and insights?
Yeah, thanks. So, on the first point, like I said, I started 8 years ago and I'm based in New York City. And 8 years ago, it was a little harder to go down to Wall Street and knock on doors. That's completely changed. And you've heard a number of CIOs and CTOs and executives come out from like customers at very heavily regulated industries. I mentioned Fidelity and earlier, or Vanguard. These companies are working with data in the cloud that is sensitive. And I think that a lot of the CIOs are telling us now that they can actually be more secure in the cloud. It's an upgrade. It's a step up. So that's actually a big consideration. We're seeing a big move to the cloud, not just because you can do more and it's on demand, but it's also for better security. And I think that's been a really important turning point that I've witnessed firsthand, especially here in New York. But the second, maybe more obvious benefits of the cloud is, we talked a lot about data quality. I agree with all the points earlier, but it's also, maybe Tony, I don't know if you'll agree or disagree, it's also impossible to make all data quality. And you can do all the massaging you want, but I see a lot of customers, a lot of companies slow themselves down because they're trying to get it perfect, and they create these bottlenecks where all data has to flow through. And the cloud kind of allows you to not do that anymore. You try your best to make data actionable and queryable, but you also don't have to as much. So I think what we're seeing with a lot of customers, like I mentioned Intuit earlier, building their data lake on AWS, or Vanguard or Fidelity, or born in the cloud companies like Netflix, I could go on and on. They're using blob storage, more specifically S3 on AWS, to kind of throw all their data in there. And then they supplement that with trusted data. We talked a lot about trust. That's why my friend Stephen Orban released Data Exchange. It's a service on AWS with trusted data sets, because a lot of companies had trouble getting trusted data. So you can enrich your data sets with trusted, known data sets, throw it all in storage in a way you couldn't before because it was too expensive and it was too impossible to process, and then spin up a bunch of resources that would have taken you years to build, like to build a data center in New Jersey. And I know that's sort of the old cloud story, like on demand, but it's really true. I mean, with every one of these companies, they'll spin up clusters, Hadoop clusters, running Hadoop jobs or Spark jobs or machine learning on demand really quickly. And so that ability to throw a ton of data in one spot and to enable a whole ton of different teams to access it with the tools of their choice whenever they need it, at whatever scale they need to access that particular amount of data, that's pretty new, and it's possible, and in most cases only costs a few bucks. And the twist on that in the recent years is we're seeing that for sensitive data and for heavily regulated data. So the last piece I'll add is, my new world with Service Catalog in particular, the missing piece, I think, was, okay, you have all this data, you can self-service, but then it's kind of a free-for-all, and you want to stop the free-for-all, especially for sensitive data. So the last piece is consistency in terms of who can access that data, and this comes back to trust, and how they access it, what tools they use. And that's what we're seeing a lot of customers use Service Catalog for. Fidelity is a really good example of this, or Intuit. They say, okay, you can have access to this chunk of data. You can use different tools. If it's unstructured, you can use like Presto with Athena, for example, so you don't have to worry too much about whether it has a schema or not. But you can only see this data and not this data. And not only that, but we're going to give you a pre-configured environment with the tools configured for both security and configuration, so that you can start working right away. And that comes back to what I think Aaron was saying around speed. So all of this data is useless if you can't start querying it quickly and safely. And those are the dimensions I'm seeing at customers most often. And that's kind of what Service Catalog helps with, because it stamps out an environment that says, hey, you can access this data using these tools that are pre-configured right now at the scale that you tell. So that kind of self-service safely is the trend that we're seeing, really, especially in the last few years, as bigger and bigger companies put more data in the cloud. So I think that's simply not possible if you're not operating in the cloud. You don't have the scale, you can't be as agile, and it would cost too much. So, for those reasons, there's really no alternative.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great case. I'm ready to go out and buy it now.
And I'm in engineering. I'm not even in sales.
I know, but I'm a believer in it. I think it's great. So those kinds of things are, I think, making a huge difference in companies' abilities to get this missing link in place, because in the old days it was so very difficult to do, and it was also very expensive to do it, and also, to your point, it wasn't a self-service kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so these are some of the advances that I'm personally really excited about, and hopefully the people on the call are too, because we can take advantage of these things and really move so much faster. And I think with so much more confidence than we could have in the past. So I want to ask another question, and Shankar, let me start with you, which is, what is the most important advice that you can give to a company that's just embarking on this journey of getting from data to real business insights? What are the 2 or 3 things that you would like to tell our audience to take action on today?
Sure. So I think we touched upon one of the key points all through the discussion is towards the data quality, right? So that's something that I would really suggest someone to be cautious about it. If you start building a model, right, the most important thing I would say is you need to have a good data. If you have a bad data and build a good model, and you're not going to get a good result, so it's obviously is going to be a bad result, right? So I see most companies are today data rich, but the ability to gain insight into their data is what they are lagging behind. So 2, 3 things. One is build a culture in your organization for data quality, right? So it could start with you could have a data engineer in your team to specifically ensure that data quality. And second thing is, when you build an insight for people to understand it, I think Max and Tony and everybody talked about it, right? Giving that story to everyone is very important. How do you design that story? I would suggest you could have a user experience as part of your team. In my experience in this journey, having a user experience as part of your data analytics team to help in visualizing the data is a great way to make the storytelling to happen. That's one thing that I have seen being successful. The third thing is automation. So try to build as much as automation, including the data. So if you could invest money to buy some solution that can help you in the data generation, that would be most beneficial rather than having your own engineer to build those data. So that's my personal experience, I would say. Instead, I would invest the engineer's time to building or selecting the appropriate algorithms and building the models and getting that insight into the data. So these are some of the things that I would suggest. And as I said in the very beginning, it is important to get 2 sides of the data. One is look at it from the operational, basically the persona-based analysis. So what is important for the operations team to look at the data, and then look at it from the business side of it. What is important for the business to look and gain insight from the data? So try to have your insights from both sides, operations and business side of it. That would add value for anyone to take it forward.
Thanks, Shankar. That's helpful, I think. I do want to, I know I've got a couple of questions here and we're starting to run short on time. So let me see if we can take some of the questions to wrap up. And if you do have a question, feel free to go ahead and put it into the Q&A. But let me start with this one. And Max, I'm going to ask you if you want to try to take this one. It's a good question and fairly technical to start. So when dealing with the age-old question of learning, sorry, let me move my glasses on.
Start lean, I guess, leaning things out.
Cleaning things out. What would you advocate is the first best step towards data quality? Using ML to fill gaps, or data scrubs and adding more heads to the engineering team, and they use AWS?
Yep. So there are a couple of ways how you can start lean. First of all, you don't need to start enforcing your data quality for your entire data set, because that might be just too big. And that would create a lot of overhead, and you will actually need to learn how to do these things properly, and you will need to create the right culture. So I would say, so first of all, identify maybe a couple of data sets where quality is the most important in a couple of teams, and start start onboarding that culture of data quality. Like Tony said, kind of looking at this problem end to end, but also start implementing data quality monitoring together with your data engineering jobs. When the data engineer implements a new data processing job and pipeline, let them also implement a data monitoring job for that and a test for it. That will be also running in production monitoring data. Anomaly detection in this case and AI in this case is actually quite nice because it allows you to start seeing some anomalies in your data and learning more about your data without a lot of investment. And it scales really well. You don't need to implement a lot of business rules. You don't need to implement a lot of code. You just collect all these metrics from your data. These metrics become time series, and then you feed them into anomaly detection models. You will need the right models, you will need the right tools, but it's, I guess, all secondary.
Okay, that's great. That was very helpful and very specific. So thank you for that. I have another question here. So this one, Tony, I think might be a good one for you. So somebody is asking when they should buy new technology versus getting help from outside resources. The question being around, how do I get help with the things that I don't know?
Yeah, so that's a great question. You know, the way we look at it at Nike is it's the build, buy, and partner components of these things. And what do I, as Nike, or inside of Nike, take hold as a commodity that we produce and all build, and what do we want to buy that is really a general commodity out in the marketplace? Things like AI, ML, pipelines, and the way to run models. The thing we need to remember is we're trying to be the best, most advanced sports apparel organization in the world. We're not investing billions of dollars into AI and ML. And so it's good for us to partner in those types of areas in order to scale and bring that to life, right? So like Max talked about, from data quality, right? Leveraging, I'm going to plug you here, Max, so Grid to help bring in automated tools for anomaly detection, right, on top of the cloud is something that can get you up to speed really quickly so you can focus on the things that matter. And those are things that tend to stick around. So I'm going to rather build the things like identity stitching, which is something that's a big deal for us. That's connecting consumers together across all of our experiences and driving our understanding of what a consumer is up the chain, right? So unknown to Nike, known to Nike, and then once you're known to Nike, member, which is highly engaged, highly available users, driving that engagement forward, right? I'm part of the activation team, so it's how do I activate data in a way to get the right content to the right consumer at the right time to get them to take the next action. And so we're building and partnering in order to bring that together and do it loosely decoupled so that you can plug and play and build and buy and do all of that in sequence with your pipeline as it drives down. But I would say have a plan, be agile and move quickly, and don't be afraid to make changes and pivot. Make sure you bring your consumers and your data customers along because you want them to still trust what you're doing. And so don't do it in isolation, which we talked about earlier. But you know, leverage people that have done this before. You can get 10x the power by partnering with somebody to implement something on like a Matt or like AWS, right? Per se. There's a lot of amazing technology. The data exchange stuff is just, we're just looking at that now. I was on a call around Foursquare location data and syncing that with consumer behavior data. I mean, that's just, it's going to give us insights around how we distribute product to get it out to consumers faster, right? Just as one idea. I mean, there's insights that this come to life. So be intentional and try it, measure that, and then change appropriately.
Yeah, great points. And I love this concept of thinking about, you know, involved in getting good insights. It's not just about technology and data, it's about people and processes and being able to balance and manage those well. And they are all important. As much as we may be technologists and we love talking about technology, all these things come into play in getting to those great insights. Thank you for that comment. We're about to run out of time. I want to just go back to our presentation for 1 second here. I want to let you all know that we have one more webinar coming up in November, which is a really exciting one that I think those of you who joined today may find very helpful. And this is with a well-known Forrester analyst who's going to be talking about how to accelerate your transformation and growth through co-innovation partnerships. So kind of what we were just talking about with Tony, which is, you know, how do you work with people outside of your organization to help speed your transition and your transformation. So I would love it if you could all come to that. But I have to say right now that I really appreciate all of you who joined today. It was so kind of you to take time out from your schedule and to come hear our panelists and panelists. I want to thank you as well for that amazing, short but sweet and very powerful edification around this idea of how do we get from data to insights. It's been interesting, it's been entertaining, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you as our audience have enjoyed it as well, and that you'll come back and join us again on November 17th for our next webinar. Thanks all for joining today and hope to see you in the future. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.